Hello, today we will speak about the features of a state. The state is a systematically important pillar of the world's geopolitical structure. It is at this level of territorial organization that lower order elements, settlements, regions, economic regions, etc., are organized in the best possible way. Elements of the same order, primarily other states, enjoy the greatest independence from one another. And higher order elements, integration groups, geopolitical systems, etc., can be influenced to the highest degree. Thus, it is the state level in politics that gives the best opportunity to translate the resources obtained from the internal organization into foreign clout. The modern political world is seen as the mosaic of states. They are so different from each other that sometimes it even seems impossible to identify them as belonging to the same group. Take, for example, the US, South Sudan, and the Vatican City. We will therefore lay emphasis on the bare minimum of qualities shared by all countries across the globe. They can often include territory, permanent resident population, national political and economic systems, acceptance as a state by the international community, capacity to redistribute public goods and maintain order and security, and many others. The Montevideo Convention, adopted by the 7th International Conference of American States, was one of the most well-known attempts to bring the debate on this issue to a close. The document stipulated that all states were equal sovereign units consisting of 1. Permanent population, 2. Defined territorial boundaries, 3. Government, and 4th, finally, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. It may sound strange, but the first criterion, permanent population, laid down by the Convention, can be neglected. The truth is that for a place to be considered a state, it does not necessarily have to have a population, meaning those holding citizenship. Special states are a good case in this point. Specifically, the Vatican City and the Order of Malta, that formerly housed the offices of powerful organizations, Catholic Church and the Sovereign Military Order of St. John. The states were created for the organizations to be able to establish their rules of the game and be independent from the countries where they function. So they don't have any population. The second criterion appears to be necessary in the context of the modern Westphalian system of international relations, which did secure the right of sovereign territories to act internationally. It's de jure sovereignty over just one hill in Vatican City, or 2 buildings, even separated spatially, like in the Order of Malta, that allows those countries to carry out governmental functions. In other words, to be qualified as a sovereign state, the political union needs to exercise formal power over its own territory, even without a permanent population. Scientifically speaking, the idea of being native to land or region is related to the notion of indigeneity, or territorial rootedness of the state. The 3rd and 4th criteria included into Montevideo Convention may boil down into the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is the ability of authorities to set out and enforce rules that govern a given territory and population, which is internal sovereignty, and to enter into the relations with other states, which is external sovereignty. Statehood thus requires the 2 necessary ingredients, namely territorial rootedness, the link to indigenous lands, and sovereignty, the capacity to formulate and enforce rules that are legitimate both at home and abroad. Based on this, we can develop the following classification of states. Sovereign states, full-fledged political entities, are strongly linked to their territories and enjoy both internal and external sovereignty. While countries which are deficient to internal sovereignty are referred to as failed states, their fellows with no territorial rootedness are merely governments in exile. Unrecognized or insurgent are the adjectives applied to territorial entities that lack external sovereignty and territorial rootedness respectively. Those political units that claim statehood but exercise neither internal nor external sovereignty are called proto-states or quasi-states. Failed states are countries which, despite enjoying external recognition by the international community and formally conforming to the requirements of statehood, to a greater or less extent lack internal sovereignty, meaning stateless. Such political entities may be classified according to those key responsibilities that they fail to fulfill. There are such indicators of state failure as loss of control of its territory, like in Somalia or in Yemen, erosion of legitimate authority to make collective decisions, like in Chad or in Congo, inability to provide public services, like in Haiti or South Sudan, or having some external forces and influences inside, like in Afghanistan or Iraq. Unrecognized states have territorial rootedness and internal legitimacy, but are limited with external legitimacy, meaning international recognition. However, what does it mean to be a fully recognized state? Is this possible? Theoretically, the answer is no, because as we said earlier, there is no scope for the precise requirements for a state. Therefore, it's impossible to define the overall number of states which we need to establish relations with. Yet, can a state be recognized by all the UN members? Theoretically, the answer is yes. This requires de jure diplomatic recognition from, at this moment, 193 UN member states. But there are 2 UN member states which have no diplomatic relations with Russia, for example, Bhutan and the Solomon Islands. Until recently, Bhutan was a protectorate of India and did not pursue its own foreign policy course. As long as double standards are relevant to Bhutan and India shields the country from contacts with other superpowers, the goal of establishing diplomatic ties with all UN members is unrealistic. Unfortunately, as we see, even Russia, the US, China, Great Britain and France, the 5 nuclear weapon states, lack recognition from some UN members because of, for example, Bhutan issue. Under such circumstances, fully recognized states should include entities accepted by a specific number of UN member states, rather than all of them. However, identifying the threshold is not an easy task. For example, China maintains diplomatic relations with 170 UN members, while Tuvalu with only 30 of them. Paradoxically, some states classed as unrecognized ones have more recognition than these UN member states. For instance, Palestine has diplomatic contacts with more than 130 countries, and Western Sahara with approximately 60. Sure, with time, after this lecture, the figures might change. In other words, in the current system of international relations, the full recognition is not a matter of numbers, but a matter of the UN membership. For a state to be brought into being internationally recognized, it is necessary to obtain an absolute majority of the UN Security Council, including obviously all permanent members, and a qualified majority, namely the 2/3 of the UN General Assembly. To recap, UN member states are classed as recognized states, while the remaining entities unrecognized. That's simple. However, to refer to the intermediary stages, which see some sovereign state support in state in question, the notion of a state which limited recognition is introduced for non-UN members, but states recognized by other UN members, like Abkhazia or Kosovo. How to establish a new state? The genesis of the state tends to be described as occurring through the following phases. Well, first, designating a future entity in linguistic and spatial terms and determining sovereignty as the main priority of the organization. Second, strengthening a common proto-state identity through the struggle for national cultural autonomy and the support for language, religious, ethnic, and cultural aspects of the entity. Third, establishing self-government and struggling for the handover of some powers to local bodies within the borders of the future entity. Four, promoting separatism as the main goal of nationwide political process. 5. Creating law enforcement bodies, paramilitary organizations, or a military wing of the organization. 6. Declaring independence de jure. And 7. Appealing to the international community for recognition. At the turn of the 20th century, quasi-statehood emerged as an unusual feature of Western politics. The different literature refers to such entities as internet-based states or micronations. Micronations may be classified into the following groups. Private quasi-states, proclaimed within the borders of their founders' private property. As an illustration of this point, the Kingdom of Tolosa was established by Robert Madison in Milwaukee in his bedroom. This micronation highlights the tension between principle of state sovereignty and property rights. Neutral quasi-states created in terra nullius, or international territories. For example, Sealand claims a former offshore platform off the British coast. West Antarctica lays claim to Mary Bird Land located in the Antarctic region. The former Japanese territories which remain unclaimed by any recognized country. Country like North Sudan was established in Bir Tawil, an unclaimed land on the border between Egypt and Sudan. And Liberland was proclaimed in Gornja Siga between Croatia and Serbia. Such small state-like units exploit the shortcoming of territorial division between sovereign states. Another example, community quasi-states. They are established by geographically concentrated communities. For example, the Danish hippie movement created Freetown of Christiania, covering the territory of the military area in Copenhagen, while a group of Lithuanian artists declared their neighborhood of Užupis independent from the rest of the country. Such entities come close to the ideals of anarchy and allow the community to live life by their own rules. Tourist quasi-states are created, sometimes even by the government, to promote tourism. For example, Principality of Seborga acts as tourism booster for this Italian village. Finally, there are internet-based quasi-states, and they function only online. So now you know how to start state building at your own bedroom.